Get your win at wallacewins.com.
All right. Rolling. Welcome. Matt Kita is in the house for the wallacewins.com podcast. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Brad.
It's a pleasure to have you here. You're a man of the people, often traveling around and jet setting all across the country.
Well, jet setting is man of the people, but
we
okay.
Listen, we are obviously happy to have you in our podcast studio today. We'll get into a little bit as we go along about Matt and who you are and what you do and all those kinds of things. But before we get into that, we're going to start off the podcast today with our rapid fire segment.
Okay.
I'm going to rapid fire questions to you, and you're going to give me a one word or couple word answer, and we're going to do it rapidly.
Okay.
All right, you ready?
Yes.
Best car you've ever owned?
A Saab 900, 1991 turbo.
Favorite breakfast?
Acai bowl.
Best sport to watch?
Baseball.
Best sport to play?
Hockey.
Movie you've seen more than any other?
Ghostbusters.
First band you saw live?
The Doobie Brothers.
Favorite band?
It's cheesy to say the Beatles, but I'd have to go with it.
Most famous person you've ever met?
Bill Clinton.
Best month of the year?
June.
Favorite sports team?
The Buffalo Bills.
Favorite UFC fighter?
I wouldn't know one.
Childhood hero?
It's been so long. Wayne Gretzky.
Coolest place you've ever been to?
Hawaii.
All right. A successful rapid fire segment, ladies and gentlemen.
Thinking about my answers now, but I'll stick with them.
We now know a lot more about Matt than we did 2 minutes ago.
All right.
In fact, we know that he doesn't watch UFC, so that's a little ding on your resume there.
Yeah.
But we'll get into some of those other topics shortly. Want to start out and just kind of let the listeners know a little bit about you, where you're from, and ultimately, why'd you become an attorney?
I'm from Buffalo, New York. I grew up there, went to college in Boston, and sort of lived all over the place for a bit, but wound up going to law school in Houston, and took a job at a firm in Dallas. And in fact, 11 years ago, May 1st, I went out on my own and started a appellate practice, just solo and on my own. And back in 2017, I took the California bar exam and started building my practice out here as well. My kiddos, who are almost 13 and 11, are born Texans, and I'll be there until they're somewhere else, but hoping to be out here before too long. And just bought a house out here, and actually kind of taking care of that. That brings me to LA today, and working with a firm, Arias Sanguinetti, in the LA and in the Bay Area, and on cases with you. So.
Absolutely. And just for the folks out there that may not know some of the nuances of the legal practice, what does it mean to be an appellate attorney?
Okay, so everyone is probably familiar with the trial lawyers. You see them on TV all the time. They talk to the juries and cross the witnesses and get very confrontational, that type of thing. The appellate lawyer is the one who's behind the scenes, who's doing all the legal briefing when the jury's in the back room and the stuff's being discussed outside their presence. Is often the appellate lawyer who's talking with the judge about what evidence can come in or what should stay out or what the jury's instruction should look like. And then when the case is over, the loser usually has some complaints about it. So hopefully we're on the winning side, and when the other side tries to take away our verdict, it's my job to make sure it sticks around. Or if we came in second place, to appeal the case. And in that case, when you go to a court of appeals, you're not retrying the case in front of a jury. You have a panel of 3 judges or justices, depending on state or federal, but 3 that you write a long brief to, give them basically a 20-minute argument where they get to interrupt you and pepper you with questions, and you justify your position.
And was there something early on in your legal career that steered you towards doing appellate work?
It's actually why I went to law school. I was working in Boston, and a buddy of mine was at BC Law, and he made his law school moot court championship. When every law school has this, it's just an exercise you do where you pretend you're an appellate lawyer, and they have a competition. So I went to see him argue, and I was just like, well, that's a cool job. You're essentially making the law or trying to change the law, but you're not running for office. You don't have to, make posters and go to chicken dinners and solicit funds and all that other stuff. You're just, using your brain and making a good argument and talking to people that actually do have the power to change things for the better. So I went to law school with that goal and ended up clerking for an appellate judge, and that's just what I've been doing since I got out.
Very interesting. So was that kind of the genesis of your desire to go to law school, seeing that and realizing that there might be a place for you to be able to use your brain and legal arguments to make some changes in the law? That
was the plan. Yeah. And really had no idea what, I was going to be doing when I got out. I worked for a defense firm for the first 6 years and eventually saw that, I didn't like the work all that much. But second, I live in Texas, and without getting overly political on your podcast here, that's not a real friendly place for people of, less means, let's say. And,
consumers.
Consumers, but also people of minorities, for women, for lots of disadvantaged groups, and the way that they're being treated by the politicians, the people that run for office and win, is not all that fair. And sometimes the only way you can help them out is through the court system. And so it wasn't just a money-making switch. I went from representing, large banks and insurance companies to fighting both of them. And it kind of gave you a little more satisfaction of going to work every day.
Absolutely. And what types of cases do you currently handle with your current practice?
So they generally fall into a couple of categories. One is the civil rights cases. I've had a lot of those over the past 10 years. You usually involve police use of excessive force, but sometimes they also involve discrimination, specifically in the workplace or in educational institutions. Texas actually has a very, what should be plaintiff-friendly law. In Texas, you don't have to buy workers' compensation insurance, but if you don't buy it, you can be sued by your employees. It's a specific cause of action out there, but there's a lot of work on it. Very early in my career on my own, I had a case go to the Fifth Circuit and to the Texas Supreme Court randomly in the same case, and that was kind of how I made my bones, so to speak. So I get a lot of that work, and then as a result of that, really kind of large catastrophic injury and death cases. Those are some of the ones that you and I have worked on.
Right.
But essentially, any case where you have a defendant with a lot to lose and a plaintiff who's severely injured with a lot to ask for, the defense is going to be on their A game. And if you know anybody that went to law school or practices law, those big firms that defend the big companies, they're no dum-dums. They're top of their class. They're smart. They had federal clerkships. They work really, really hard. And, it's really David versus Goliath a lot. I think you and I have seen that on going up against some of the defendants we've had.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. And so in kind of assessing where you're at with your practice right now, you're doing, work in Texas and you're doing work in California, and your practice is really blossoming. Where do you see your practice going in the next 5 years?
Well, I'm very lucky to have just joined Arias Sanguinetti as of counsel, and they have an excellent reputation, and they have been they gained notoriety nationwide for handling some very, very important work. And a lot of my stuff has been focused on Texas issues, aside from the civil rights cases, which, of course, have law that has nationwide implications. But seeing on the things that they're working on, the large dollar employment disputes, mass torts, things of that nature. The other thing that some colleagues of mine and I have been working on is sort of a consulting group that helps plaintiffs who are stuck in arbitration clauses. And that appears to be, when you and I have success, our defendants rally together and powwow and say, all right, how can we avoid paying out a judgment like that again? So they find a way to stick an arbitration clause into everything, and that way they can have their own secret proceedings that make no precedent and nobody can ever find out the bad stuff that they did. So some colleagues of mine and I have formed a group called Plaintiff Arbitration, and our goal, to put it bluntly, is to make arbitration so absolutely miserable for these companies that they will be begging for a jury trial. And if you can't tell, screwing with bullies is kind of fun for me. So I'm looking forward to working on that as well.
I love it. What advice would you give to someone looking to hire an attorney for their personal injury or civil rights case?
All right, this is going to sound very self-serving, but it's important. If you have a case that's not something you routinely do, if you have a specific specialty, then you know what you're doing. Let's pretend it's a routine car accident case. And I know that there are a lot of car accidents that are not routine, so I'm not trying to paint a broad brush. If you have a routine car accident case, you have a system in place, you know what you're going to plead, you know it's going to be disputed, you know it's going to go to mediation, you know, maybe a 2-day trial. That's not the case you want me on. When you're outside your comfort zone and when you're asking for a lot of money from a big, deep pocket and you know that there's going to be some legal issues in play, whether it's what evidence can get in or whether you even have a claim in the first place, you should really get your appellate lawyer in before you even file the case. You know, sort of let your appellate lawyer sort of act as a field general, you know, discussing in the beginning what you're trying to go after, how to get it, how to keep it in, how to keep bad stuff out. That's the goal. The other thing I would say, and I've noticed this in Texas and even in California as well, which is obviously a state that's a lot more friendly to the plaintiff, is that these, you know, billion-dollar insurance companies, they're like I said, they're very smart, and they're not going to try and whittle away at established precedents that are consumer friendly in a major case that's getting a ton of attention. You know, if it's whatever, Google versus Microsoft, that's not the one where they're going to be doing their sneaky work, their little experimenting. Those are the ones where they need sure things. What they do is they take cases that involve perhaps a $25,000 insurance policy, and then they start inserting some new defense in there that you've never seen before. And I think sometimes they catch members, our colleagues, a little flat-footed who sort of see every case as a little bit routine. And then all of a sudden they're like, you argued what? And we lost? And somehow it was sustained on appeal? And they kind of catch our colleagues when they're not ready for it. And when you see, to the long answer to your question, when you see something that just looks a little bit different than your routine practice, or you're going into something where you really don't have a firm footing, that's where someone like me or many of my colleagues that do this, that's where we can be of assistance.
Excellent. That's excellent advice. All right, now we're going to move into the next section of our podcast today called Underrated, Overrated.
Okay.
And I'm going to give you different topics, and you're going to tell me whether they're underrated or overrated with a brief explanation why. I'll also preface this by saying, just from experience of prior podcast guests, you can't equivocate. You can't say, well, it's underrated because of this and it's overrated because of that. You have to give one or the other.
Binary.
All right. You ready?
Yes.
Ranch dressing.
Oh, overrated. I mean, first of all, anything with mayonnaise in it is not designed for human consumption. Okay. Second, I'm from Buffalo, and everybody knows that you put blue cheese on a chicken wing, which I also don't eat. But the point is that ranch dressing that's not for people.
Star Wars.
Overrated. I liked it as a kid, but now it's ubiquitous. And even if you watch the movie now, they're fairly cheesy.
SoCal weather.
Underrated. I live in Texas. I would do anything to be here on a rainy, cloudy day.
Hot dog eating competitions.
Overrated. It's revolting. It's like literally everything I hate about this country combined into a TV show.
Shohei Ohtani.
I want to say underrated just because he's so phenomenal that he's probably doing something that I don't know about and I want to hear about it.
Netflix.
And chill? Or just Netflix?
Netflix.
I'll say underrated because even though they're constantly we're constantly being told that they're about to fall off the map or their stock price is going down, they always wind up putting on a new show or a new documentary or something that keeps me paying that $10 a month.
Bacon.
Overrated just because so many people like it that I want to be different.
Fireworks.
Overrated. Again, same reason as bacon.
The Kardashians.
Oh, God, overrated. Do I need to give an explanation?
I'm waiting for a guest to tell me they're underrated.
Oh, God.
And to hear the explanation why.
Right. You know what? They need more attention. They've done so much for society.
Bald eagles.
I think they're overrated by the people that keep pictures of them in their living room.
I'm sure you have more of those in Texas than we do in California.
I hope so.
Country music.
As a whole, can you parse it a little? I mean, Willie Nelson just turned 90, so I don't want to say he's overrated. The trash that you hear on top 40 stations is way overrated. I equivocated, but, I'm on the hot seat.
I knew it was coming at some point. Starbucks.
Overrated. But I used to be a big coffee drinker. I'm not anymore, so.
Coachella Music Festival.
I've never been, so I'm going to say underrated because, when I do finally go, and I'm pushing 50, so there's a chance that won't happen, I'm sure I'll be impressed.
The pitch clock in Major League Baseball.
Underrated. Went to a game with my dad and my brother on Sunday, and I think the Texas Rangers scored 15 runs. The Yankees scored like 3. An 18-run ball game that was over in 2.5 hours. It's unbelievable.
It's beautiful.
Love it.
Dad jokes.
Oh, underrated. Yeah, that's my reason for existence.
All right, very good. All right, we'll continue the conversation. I want to talk a little bit about, the law and your experience in the law, and have you provide some advice and words of wisdom and insight for our listeners and our viewers. I was thinking a little bit about this next topic recently, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it. Obviously everybody, well, not everybody, I would say obviously a lot of people out there have heard and read the book by Malcolm Gladwell called Outliers, where he attempts to provide a theory for why people become ultra successful. And, in a nutshell, without boiling down his book into a couple sentences, he talks about you needing kind of the right opportunity, the right environment, and then 10,000 hours of, honing your craft to get to a point where you can be ultra successful in any particular field or practice or area. Agree with that? Disagree? And what do you think makes a successful attorney?
I don't disagree. I think it's a little bit of a truism. Like if you take these 3 things in some varying amount, then something will happen. Well, no shit. Well, but I remember part of that book talking about how people who are born in January are more likely to be a good or be an NHL hockey player, because that's where they have the cutoffs for the leagues. I was born in September, which on first blush makes you think that that's why my hockey career never took off. But on a serious note, sure, that gives you some advantage, fine, but coupled with that, is the 10,000 hours of honing your craft combined with seizing opportunities at the right time, and that's it's like trying to tell somebody how to bake a cake by saying, oh, you just use a little bit of all of this and it comes out. Well, it's what you do with what you got is the long story short. What was the second part of your question?
What do you think in your experience in dealing with so many different attorneys, what do you think makes certain attorneys successful?
Well, I'll talk about the ones that I like. The ones that I seek to emulate, and the ones that I consider a success. I don't know what their bank account looks like or how big their house is or whatever, but the people that I let's put it this way, the lawyers I see that are happy, which is, I think, a pretty good indicator of success, are people that can find themselves or find a way to keep themselves from getting so emotionally connected with their case that they take winning or losing, whether it's a case or even just a specific ruling, personally. We're essentially playing a game. It's a game that has life or death consequences or, serious financial consequences for lots of people. But people that remember that our title is attorney and counselor at law, and a lot of times the counselor part is more important. Yes, we are unique in that we can go into a courtroom and represent other people, and non-attorneys can't do that. But knowing when to fight and when not to fight, I think is the hallmark of a good attorney. And the people that I find that fight the hardest, for example, advertise themselves as, fight to the death, we're tough attorneys, whatever, how they want to puff themselves up. That just seems to be kind of a miserable way to live life. And I see it even with the attorneys that are on my side, object to everything, make life as difficult as possible, waste their time, spend their money. Man, I don't have that kind of time. Let's fight about what's worth fighting about. Let's try and get it in front of a jury, and let's make the best argument we can. But for example, I think we could talk about this. You and I are working on a case where we designated our client saying something like what his home address was. And we got a response like, objection, calls for an expert opinion. Like, what? Like, why did you do that? Like, you let your fingers type that like on purpose. What's in your psyche that would make you think this was worth doing? So anyway, the long way of saying is I think the successful attorneys in my book are the ones that are happy, and the ones that are happy are the ones that aren't fighting all the time. They fight for their clients, and then they go home and go to bed and do something else.
Interesting take. I think I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about not just what you see as the characteristics of a successful attorney, which seems to be, kind of what you're saying in terms of somebody who's, got the proper perspective and the proper balance with understanding their practice is important, but it also doesn't need to be, a tooth and nail death match on every little thing in order to have success. But do you have any thoughts on sort of what you see with successful attorneys in terms of their DNA of what got them to the place where they were able to establish a practice and have success and have that work-life balance that you're talking about?
I would say you have to be a risk taker. If you do everything on and that's not just mean taking a challenging case, but I mean sometimes it's a financial risk. I got very lucky, didn't even know about it, but I moved from Houston to Dallas, and in so doing, met some people that have helped me launch my career and, done very, very well for myself. But I was a, 29-year-old kid with no connections to a city. It was just an opportunity that why not take it? So stuff like that, whether it's spending money that maybe you don't quite have yet, or making an investment in your future, that's one thing that I've seen. The other, to balance that is prudence, and that is knowing which risks are worth taking and which ones are going to keep you awake at night such that you can't focus on your work, that you can't focus on your family, maybe, do things in your personal life that you otherwise would not be doing. And that's, the people that I know, that I, consider the people that I look up to, the people that have achieved that balance. And that's it's kind of like Malcolm Gladwell's book. It's a little of everything, but there's no real recipe here. It's just something when you put together. Yeah.
The risk thing, I think I really connect and agree with, because I was having this conversation with somebody recently, and we live in such a culture of everybody posting their accomplishments on social media, and everybody seeing the finish line on everybody's work and everybody's success. And what is not shown is, the post from that same professional, staying at their office till 3 a.m, 6 months before that to set something up to eventually allow them to post the record verdict or the settlement or the, taking their company public or whatever professional success they have. And so a lot of times, in my view, some of that success that people achieve that other people look at and say, how'd they do that and all that, it really is an accumulation of consistent decision-making and risk-taking to lay the groundwork and to set that up. And nothing happens overnight, and nothing happens in a vacuum. I think back when I started my practice and went out on my own about 8 years ago. I started my firm with one part-time employee and a 500 square foot office and 7 cases. And about 90 days into my endeavor, I got a call from an attorney who, with his partner, runs a big PI firm in LA. And they had recently had an associate that quit without notice and was handling a portfolio of cases, smaller to mid-size personal injury, auto, premises cases, of about 45 cases that they were handling. And this attorney said to me, look, we're looking at it. We got a lot going on at our firm. You know, we could recruit and hire and onboard a new, associate to take over the portfolio, but we could also just give you all 45 cases. And at that point, I only had one part-time employee. I was just starting. I didn't even have the bandwidth to take on 45 cases. But I really felt that it was one of those moments in time where I said, this is one of those moments where you either take the plunge and you go for it, or you shrink back into what's safe and what might not be as risky. And I didn't even get off the call to think about it. Within 10 seconds, I said, I'll take all the cases.
Well, obviously it worked out well for you. But, I think for anybody who's going to be an attorney, whether, you wind up doing plaintiff work or defense or in-house or litigation or transaction or whatever, at the end of the day, you're ultimately trading on your name. And that was why I went off on my own. I mean, my daughter was just born. I had a 20-month-old and a 2-month-old, and I was talking about quitting my job. Now, their mom is a successful attorney, and they didn't they didn't miss a meal. Let's put it that way. But in terms of why did I take that risk then? It was because I had this fear that if I just kept being a good worker bee for these guys who at the time were my age, but 45, 50, 55-year-old guys that were all about sending their kids to college, they would use the shit out of me. Not in a bad way, but they just would. They'd give me all their work to do, for the next 15, 16 years, pay their kids college education, and then retire. And I would be exactly where I am right now with no clients, always working in the background. Nobody knew who I was, and I wanted something where I was signing my name. And I think, when you, rather than just sort of do those cases, on contract and just get the work done and they take all the glory, that wouldn't have done anything. You wouldn't be having a W on your shirt right now,
right?
If you were writing for somebody else. But by taking that risk, that's what prompted you. Now people know who Bradley Wallace is,
right?
And I don't want to pat myself on the back too much, but I took some risks in that case. Took on way more work that I could handle, and think for a second it didn't, affect my ability to sleep, my stress level. I'm sure my kids have felt it in one way or another. But that's, again, how many, hours did Wayne Gretzky spend at the ice rink? Let's put it that way. You give up something in order to achieve the greatness that you want to receive.
Right.
I don't think I'm great by any stretch of the imagination, but you're asking me to talk on your podcast. I must have done something well.
Yeah. You don't have to think you're great. I think you're great.
Thank you.
Your work speaks for itself. So
thank you.
So just continuing with that conversation, what advice would you have for someone thinking about going to law school, but who's not sure, for example, what type of law they want to practice?
I don't think law school really trains you for the kind of law you want to practice, with the exception of maybe a handful of schools that are advertise and market themselves like, we train trial lawyers, period. Our goal is to get you, through the subject that'll pass you on the bar exam or that'll let you pass the bar exam, and you're going to learn courtroom skills. There are some law schools like that. The overwhelming majority produce generalists, and you go and take your first year gut classes just like everybody else does, and maybe you land a job with somebody that you wind up becoming friends with, or you hear about something from someone else and you gain an interesting specialty. I went to law school thinking I wanted to do education law, and do the appellate end on that side. And it turns out I didn't get that job. I got a job doing maritime work, which launched a bunch of different doors for me.
Right.
So it's kind of like my friends are now at the age where they have kids that are starting to go to college, and they're saying, well, I don't want to go here because they don't have a good computer science program, but this place has a good something. I mean, unless you're going to school for like engineering,
Right.
you would want to go to school that didn't have one. But most law schools are pretty much the same.
Yeah. I totally agree. I actually had a friend of mine recently approached me. His son is just graduated college, and he approached me and he said, hey, my son is interested in going to law school, but he wants to take a year off and clerk at a firm to figure out if that's what he likes to do or that's what he wants to do. And I said, my response to him was, I don't think that's a good idea.
Oh, really?
Because for some of the same reasons you're saying, I said, if he wants to go to law school, he should just go to law school.
Right.
Because when I went to law school, even when I graduated, I still didn't even know what I was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
I knew what I didn't want to do. I knew I didn't want to do family law.
Oh, God.
And I knew I didn't want to do criminal law.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, I had no idea what I actually wanted to do. And I didn't figure it out until after I graduated and passed the bar and became an attorney. But the other point I made to him was, let's just say, for example, your son says, yeah, I want to do family law. And I want to clerk at a firm for a year before I go to law school just to make sure I like family law. Well, now you're sort of resting all of your hopes on getting a clerkship at a firm that does family law that's a good firm and a good environment that gives them a good experience, because not all family law firms are created equal. Not all personal injury firms are created equal. And it could very well be that he might end up eventually landing at a family law firm where he's very happy, but he might clerk at a firm.
This is my experience, and I don't know how you have your staff, so I don't want to impugn anything, but most law firms that I know are extraordinarily busy places. It's not like you have a lot of time sitting around to be like, take someone under their wing and be like, this is the discovery process. What we do is we send these called, it's just like put that in an envelope and get it out the door. Or that's what it was when I was there. Email this to so-and-so, run this over there, put this in PDF format, whatever. I mean, you're going to be doing things that lawyers do, but you're going to be learning the law. It's not like you're going to, be learning any more about the intricacies of family law. It's basically how to run around like a crazy person like lawyers do.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in being a lawyer, go to law school with this caveat. First, in terms of what you should do for a year, I would say go be a ski instructor in Switzerland for a year, and maybe a bartender in Ireland, or a surf instructor in the Caribbean, or spend some time doing something that's not work and do that for like a year.
That's what I told him.
Or 18 months, just because you don't get that break.
Correct. I told him if your son wants to take a year off and experience the world. Don't take a year off and clerk in a law firm
right.
before you go to law school.
You're going to have 50 years for that.
Yeah.
And I try and travel as much as I can. That's my outlet. I'm a solo. I don't even have a secretary. I don't have associates. I just, if I have a laptop and an internet connection, I'm at work. And even like this particular week, I have a couple of things due that I'm trying to, kind of get done in the morning and enjoy a couple days in Santa Barbara and Los Angeles. It's still on my mind. There's still somebody that's going to be calling. I've heard my phone buzz twice since we've been sitting here, and you never get that break again. So before you become a lawyer, take a good long vacation, because you're not going to get one for maybe the rest of your life. And let's pretend it's only 30 years. That's a long time, especially when it's more years than you've been alive.
Yeah. That might be the best pitch for why people shouldn't go to law school.
Well, but what job do you want to do every day for the rest of your life? Right. If you're a well-funded ski instructor in the Alps, I guess maybe, but I'm sure they're bitching about, problem clients and the cold weather and the long hours or whatever. So, that's why they call it work.
Right.
But I think this is a, rewarding profession. Don't wish I was doing something else. I do wish I wasn't doing and thinking about it all the time, but that's where the balance comes in.
Absolutely. If you could go back and give advice to your 18-year-old self, what would it be?
Become a ski instructor helps. It would definitely have been travel more. I think there's a lot of pressure, and rightly so, but especially in this country to, it's like you have a checklist. Get good grades in high school so you can get a high score on the GMAT or the LSAT or the GRE or the MCAT or whatever, so that you can do something else and you get good grades in that and you get, and it's sort of like at some point in time, and I know this happened to me, I don't know for yourself, but all of a sudden you're like, 32, 33 years old. You're like, I've checked every box. And you're like the dog that caught the car. Like, what do I do? It's just this for 50 more years?
Right.
And I wish I had taken some opportunity to say, all right, you're going to be working for a while. So, you know what? Run up some credit card debt, take a nice trip, see things you're not going to be able to see otherwise, learn a new language, meet people. Because this is a great job. But if you're always looking over your shoulder at stuff you wish you had done instead, you can get kind of down on yourself. And I try to avoid that now.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, last question in this segment. If you weren't a lawyer and you could be or do anything, what would it be?
A successful stand-up comedian. Being an unsuccessful one sounds like a really terrible job. But, if you can make people laugh for a living, I think you're accomplishing quite a lot.
Yeah. Open mic night at a stand-up comedy club has always been on my bucket list.
Yeah, mine too. And then I chicken out every time.
All right. So we're making a pledge here on the podcast. Keita and I are going to go in the next 12 months.
Okay.
We're going to go to a comedy club, open mic, and we're going to each give whatever they give us, 3 to 5 minutes or whatever.
Your tight 10. I don't know. That's I'll add to my list.
All right, deal?
All right, let's do it.
All right. It's been sealed. All right, we're going to get into our last segment now, which is called Get the W or Take the L.
Okay.
And I'm going to we have 3 very recent news stories that I'm going to give you a brief synopsis, and then I'm going to ask you a question regarding the story for you to tell us whether that particular story gets the W or takes the L. All right, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
A Minnesota state senator became a reluctant star on social media yesterday after he voted shirtless while lying in bed during what should have been a routine legislative commission meeting. In a video streamed on YouTube, Senator Calvin Barr of East Bethel can be briefly seen voting with a Schoolhouse Rock "I'm Just a Bill" character on the wall behind him during a Zoom call on Monday with the Legislative Audit Commission. After voting, he quickly turned off his camera, leaving a black screen showing just his name. A Senate spokeswoman said Barr, who's a truck driver, worked until 4:45 a.m. and then went to bed before Monday's meeting. She said he would not be commenting on the vote or the video. So the question is, does Senator Barr's shirtless Zoom vote get the W or take the L?
Did it count? Or was it like all exercise in futility? Like you tried to vote and they said, no, sorry, you can't vote remote.
From my understanding of the story, his vote was counted.
Oh, then yeah, you get the W.
By any means necessary.
Oh yeah, it's your job. I mean, if he hadn't voted, or alternatively, if he did something that he knew wouldn't succeed, then he wasn't doing his job. So,
shout out to Senator Barr. He's representing the people even with the shirt off his back.
Dad jokes.
See what I did there?
Yeah.
All right, next one. 14-year-olds in Wisconsin could serve alcohol to seated customers in bars and restaurants under a bill circulated for co-sponsorship on Monday. Under the current law, only workers aged 18 and above can serve alcohol to customers in Wisconsin. The bill would broaden that to workers ages 14 to 17. They could only serve to seated customers, not drinkers who are at the bar itself. The current age limit on serving alcohol, quote, causes workforce issues due to an establishment's underage employees only being able to do part of their job, the bill sponsors Senator Rob Staffsholt of New Richmond and Representative Chance Green of Grandview said in a memo circulated Monday seeking co-sponsors. They said their idea, quote, creates a simple solution to the state's workforce shortage problems in the food and beverage industry. The bill requires the licensed operator of the bar or restaurant to be on the premises and supervising. If the proposal passes, Wisconsin would have the lowest age limit for workers allowed to serve alcohol, according to the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. So the question is, Mr. Kita, does the proposed bill in Wisconsin allowing 14-year-olds to serve alcohol at bars and restaurants get the W or take the L?
Without more info, absolutely take the L. Do you want me to qualify?
Please.
All right. Bars and restaurants generally have a provision in the law where they can be not liable when their employees sue drunk people if that bartender or server has taken some type of class. That's their affirmative defense. They're off the hook. Well, what are you going to do when a 14-year-old overserves someone who then goes out and kills a family? If there's not a provision in that law that says if you're employing a 14-year-old, you are strictly liable. Like, you buy the whole farm if that kid does something stupid, then maybe let's talk. Although it just seems to me that, making alcohol a little harder to get, would not be the worst thing for not just Wisconsinites, but everyone. But certainly anything that would allow people that are injured by drunk people who are overserved, taking a remedy away from them, that's no good.
All right, last one. This is going to be close to your heart.
Uh-oh.
The Buffalo Bills have been working towards a deal for a new stadium in Orchard Park, New York. Now, that deal is reportedly near its final approval. According to the Buffalo News, Erie County Legislature is holding a special session to, quote, vote on all of the agreements associated with the new $1.54 billion Bills Stadium. If all goes well, Erie County Executive Mark Polenkarts says the Bills could begin work on the stadium by the end of the week. New York State has committed to funding $600 million of the estimated $1.4 billion project, with the NFL and the Bills investing $550 million and Erie County investing $250 million. The new stadium will be owned by the state rather than the county, as is currently the case with Highmark Stadium in Orchard Park, where the Bills have played since 1973. At $850 million, it is the largest taxpayer handout for a new stadium in U.S. history, even before additional subsidies such as annual maintenance costs, property tax exemptions, and tax exemptions for municipal bond interest are considered. These factors could easily drive the total government price tag well over $1 billion. So, as a diehard Buffalo Bills fan and season ticket holder, does the Bills' new stadium, with taxpayers footing over 60% of the bill, get the W or take the L?
Obviously, I'm biased, but I'm even from just a rational standpoint, neutral standpoint. I said take the W. I think it's important not just to make sure that Buffalonians feel good. If you're not familiar with New York politics and how it works, in fact, maybe California might be a good example. Sacramento's the capital, but the action happens in LA and San Francisco. Well, New York, New York City area gets lots of funding for lots of things that are a lot more than $1 billion. And it makes sense. There's a lot of people down there, and I get it. But, Buffalo is a great city that for the past 50 years or so had kind of gone relatively unattended, and the state kind of allowed it to crumble. And to make an investment like that, knowing full well that it will be paid off, this isn't going to be a white elephant, but to keep a team there, for a lot of people, that's one of the reasons they like living there. I grew up literally 2 miles from the stadium. Like, we would go to church and my mom would drop us off, go home, watch the game, and drive towards the stadium and pick us up. Like, we're that close. I know the area very well. What I'm hoping is that it spurs some more investment and really actually does trickle down. And if for no other reason, New York didn't make this investment in the Manhattan and on Long Island, and now the Jets and Giants play in New Jersey. So as New York's last NFL franchise, I think it's worth the effort.
Very good. You heard it here, folks. Mr. Buffalo Bill with Mr. LA Rams. The NFL connection is
We had a good picture of that game last year.
Is palpable, yeah.
Put that on your site.
Yeah, well, I didn't put it on the site because the Bills ended up really kicking our ass in that game.
I forgot.
So I'm not sure you did forget, but
Well,
that's okay. I mean, even though we didn't make the playoffs,
that Super Bowl must feel nice. I don't know anything about that.
It feels really nice. It feels really nice.
Well, we play the Chargers again this year, so in SoFi, so we'll be back.
Yeah, SoFi is a great stadium, and very much looking forward to this new NFL season. And I'm sure as a Bills fan, you're equally excited to get
Fingers crossed.
Get back in the playoffs and make another Super Bowl run. See if you can knock off Mahomes this year.
Yeah,
but
we got I was about to say Brett Favre. Geez, we got what's his name? The Packers quarterback. Jesus, Aaron Rodgers playing for the Jets now, which is got my Jet fan friends all believing that they're Super Bowl bound, which is we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I read something the other day that the Jets are paying Aaron Rodgers like $60 million a year to be the second best quarterback in New York. So,
and he plays in Jersey,
right.
All things considered.
But listen, thanks so much for coming by. It was a pleasure to have you
Absolutely.
on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
And ladies and gentlemen, Matt Keita. I love that. That's the Bills Mafia right outside.
It's our live studio audience.
Get your win at wallacewins.com.